Hi, I'm Colin Hung with Healthcare IT Today, where we explore the latest technology trends and interesting stories in health IT. Right now, I'm about to have a really interesting conversation about data ethics and AI in healthcare. And with me today is Reggie Townsend, who is the Vice President of Data Ethics Practice here at SAS. Welcome to the program, Reggie.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Totally amazed at the presentation you gave earlier today and some of the comments you've made around data ethics and the responsible use of AI. Can you maybe hit some of the highlights for our audience here around some of those things you spoke about?
Yeah, so I think the thing that started off with just kind of this notion of human centricity is one of our key principles. Talked about how we fortify our principles here at SAS with a combination of oversight, so executive attention to matters associated with AI, from the field through procurement situations, from that to risk management and controls and methods necessary to remain compliant with the emerging legal frameworks. Have a conversation about what we're doing here culturally to make sure that our employees are reflective of the values that we hold dear, specific to ethical AI and trustworthy AI. And then certainly want to make sure that our platform, our product, is reflective of these same values. And so we're building features into the platform that are going to allow our customers to remain compliant with some of these same regulatory frameworks as they emerge.
So when we say the words responsible AI, what does that mean to you? And how have you implemented that here at SAS?
Yeah, so it's interesting, and this is going to be a bit of a play on words.
Sure.
So we think about trustworthy AI here at SAS primarily because we want to make sure that we're building a platform that is worthy of the trust of our customers, so that our customers can use our capabilities to go out and build applications that are responsible. And again, I trust that it's a bit of a play on words, but I do think it's important that we recognize that AI it's an ecosystem. Platform providers like us have a part to play. People who are developers have a part to play. Users who are consuming have a part to play, right? And I think there needs to be trust and responsibility throughout that entire chain.
Yeah, because one of the things you brought up in your presentation was that the trust gap with AI is one of the biggest challenges. It's not the technology. And trusting the AI is going to be a prerequisite to deploying it in high-risk use cases, like in healthcare, for example. And you mentioned something that I was really fascinated around in terms of you're trained your own staff to recognize when there might be an AI ethics issue and how to bring that forward. Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so it goes back to this principles conversation. So we've got a collection of 6 principles like human centricity, inclusivity, accountability, robustness, etc. And so what we do as a coming out of the training is want to make sure that folks have had time to spend dealing with the tensions that exist as it relates to these principles. So I'll give you an example. If we're talking about inclusivity and make sure that there's adequate representation as we're designing, as we're developing, as we're deploying technologies, if you're in a field situation where there isn't adequate representation, what do? Does it say we aren't inclusive? Well, maybe in that particular circumstance it does. But are we still human-centric? Are we making sure that what we're deploying is for the benefit of human beings, agency, equity, and well-being? Are we still robust? So is the product going to be safe and reliable? And do we have adequate accountability methods put in place? Well, if we can check the box on enough of those, then we might say, okay, we're satisfied here, and then we're going to monitor over time to ensure that there's no bias as a consequence of the underrepresented data that we've got, as an example. So we want to put people in real world situations, because attempting to prescribe, thou must do X, Y, and Z isn't real world, right? So we want to put people in real world sorts of situations and deal with some of those nuances and complexities as they will actually arise.
And that is one of the big concerns, especially in healthcare, is that AI is kind of a black box today. Right? We don't really know the data it was trained on. We don't know the data sets that it was used, that the algorithm was developed using. And so it's not clear whether or not there's underrepresentation, overrepresentation in that that data set. How would we go about ensuring that we do have that, and therefore build on that trust that you spoke about earlier?
Yeah, so that's a common notion, and it's a bit of a misnomer to suggest that all AI is built with data that is, not properly biased, etc. AI has existed in the back office, operations of many enterprises, healthcare and otherwise, for a long time. So we have to accept that kind of automation play has existed for some time. Largely, the conversation, though, has drifted to kind of where you're headed, which is if we're dealing with people, then we want to make sure that the algorithms that we're deriving decisions from are adequately representative of the people who might be ultimately impacted, right?
Right.
And so that's where we do have to get really careful. So how do we guarantee that? Well, there are no guarantees because we're always going to build AI for the present and future based on data, either from the past or the immediate present. And so if the data from the past is biased because humans are biased, then guess what's going to happen with the AI? It's going to be biased. So I, Colin, like to look at this not so much as how do we de-bias, so to speak, but really how do we identify bias and mitigate against biases that might be negatively impacting actual individuals.
Right, like just because of a data set might be biased one way or another, because you're right, I mean, I don't think we'll ever have completely unbiased data. But just knowing that allows us to maybe treat the AI with a little bit of grain of salt, or know at least where to deploy it properly, where the bias is not as less risky, right? Or it's not as big of a deal. So that's interesting. I mean, we're not having that conversation enough in healthcare. Now, you mentioned in your presentation you're doing some incredible work with Erasmus, with the REAL lab. Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, so Erasmus is a medical center in the Netherlands, and what we did was we teamed up with Erasmus as well as TU Delft, which is one of their largest, or actually the largest and oldest university in the Netherlands. So it's a public-private partnership where we put together a lab with the endorsement of the Dutch government.
Sure.
And so this lab is designed to operate AI in a clinical setting responsibly. So each of us is bringing different levels of expertise to the party, right? Folks who deal with surgeries all day long, and folks who deal with digital ethics, and folks who deal with technology. And what we're doing is we've got kind of this multidisciplinary group of experts coming together, thinking about things related to medicine, digital ethics, policy, you name it, focus on specific use cases. So as an example, we want to make sure that if you have an oncology related surgery, that the prescribed approach is 6 days post-surgery, then the patient gets to leave. Well, what happens if a patient is healing at a faster rate and is able to go home after 2 days? We all know that people heal better at home usually than they do in hospitals, right? And so if we could create decision systems that alert surgeons to say, you know what, this is a 2-day patient here versus this is a patient who might need to stick around for 8 days, then we're all the better for it. So some of the early findings have gotten us to the point where we can say confidently that we've saved about 250 patient days already. And so that not only has an effect on the patient, which is huge, that's the greatest benefit, but think about it from an insurance perspective as well. If you don't have to pay for another 250 days, isn't that a pretty good thing, right? Even in a single payer system where, the government paid, at the end of the day, if you could be more efficient with the use of the AI, why not be more efficient? And so what we're in the process of doing is continuing to train these models to make sure that before we use them as emblematic of something that ought to be used more broadly, that we're taking kind of the stepwise approach to ensure that these things are trained in ways that are appropriate.
And not only that, but also it improves access for all the other patients who, in a single payer system and a government paid for system like we have in Canada, there's a lot of access issues and wait times. So if you can save 250 days, that just means more patients can flow through.
That's exactly right.
Talk to me a little bit more about the ethics work you're doing at the AI as a whole. You're a member of a few committees and coalitions around this. What are some of the things that you're talking about in those organizations?
So a couple of things we're talking about. One is operating with a set of understood, self-imposed, I'm almost hesitating to call them standards, we'll just call them methods, that technology companies and others agree to as necessary to ensure that we don't have bias in our algorithm. So that's kind of one approach. But then from a government perspective, I sit on the National AI Advisory Committee here in the U.S., we're looking at this holistically, trying to think about what are the impacts from an R&D perspective, what are the, kind of the international cooperation implications as it relates to AI. We're also thinking about, the bias issue very, very much. And so we just released a set of recommendations to the president here just last week. And so we'll see where those end up, but everybody go out to AI.gov, right? I'd recommend go check them out if you want to learn more about what those recommendations are.
You said something that I thought was really provocative in your opening keynote that said, with AI now, we have the potential to spread disinformation at scale, right? Or have the
erode trust.
Erode trust. Sorry, that's what you said. We have now the ability to erode trust at scale. Tell me more about that, because I found that really, really interesting.
Well, I think you just kind of hit on it with deep fakes, right? Like, imagine looking at a photo, looking at a video, right, of someone who you think is there who actually isn't there, saying the things that are being said, right? Now, it's cool when it's, something entertaining on YouTube,
sure,
right? It's an entirely different matter if you could think about a world leader communicating to the citizens of his or her nation that now is the time to panic because we are under attack. Or, hey, look at, this missile flying into our capital. Now we have to react. All right, those are very real situations that are present. Like, this isn't futures, these are present. And so if we're dealing in a world where it becomes very difficult to trust what we're seeing and hearing, that's a completely new world that humans haven't existed in, right? So learning how to grapple with that is going to be a significant challenge. So when I talk about this erosion of trust, it doesn't take too many leaps of faith to think about how if we can't trust those around us, if we can't trust what we see and hear, that erodes society, right? Because trust is kind of that unwritten rule that kind of keeps us together. And so that does, that unsettles me. And I think it's important that, overall we first recognize the importance of this, right? Second, that we start to raise our overall level of understanding about what AI is and isn't, and put ourselves in a position to begin to notice some of the particulars. So as an example, if you're looking at computer-generated visuals, oftentimes there are little telltale signs, like the digits don't necessarily line up on those hands as they do with actual hands. So those sorts of things are important for us to be able to educate our public about, so that we can all have a level of awareness and hopefully try to keep this, this thread of trust together long enough for us to start to put some government guardrails or some technologies or some enforcements in place for us to be able to understand this technology slightly differently.
Now, you also had a challenge for us in the media, where you said, responsible AI also requires responsible rhetoric.
You were listening, weren't you?
Around the AI.
Good,
So tell me more about that, because I totally buy into that. We, on one hand, can't be sensationalist for the sake of being sensationalist, yet there are some dangers, yet those dangers are probably low probability that we don't really talk about in the media as much. So tell me what led to that statement that you made. You know what?
I've been sitting on that one, Colin, because I wanted to say it to the right audience at the right time, and I wanted to have thought about it myself first, and it just kind of came out earlier today. Look, we all have a part to play in this AI ecosystem, and you all have a unique role in that you get to tell the story to the masses. Like, I talk to crowds or whatever, but I don't have the kind of reach that the journalist community writ large has. And I understand the pressures, right? You want to attract eyes to what you're doing. You're developing content. You want to, make sure that it's enriched. You want to, you're going to get paid for it, the whole thing. Like, all of that's really important. But we have to make sure that we're acting out of our interest with the potential impact to others in mind as well.
Gotcha.
Right, and so that's how we're guiding our company, right? And I just felt like it was important to kind of share that sentiment with you all from a media perspective, because as I said, we're scaring people, and most people don't understand enough about AI to not be afraid. Like those of us who are involved, we can ask critical questions, and we can kind of call things out when they don't pass the sniff test. But when you think about, I think about people in my family who just learned to spell AI last November when ChatGPT came out, right?
Right.
For years they're like, well, what do you do? I don't quite get it, but now they get it, right? And so those kind of people are, afraid. I was sitting in a ride share, on the way from the airport, and as common, driver asked me, what has you traveling so much?
Right.
And I told her, and the first response is, oh, that's scary, right? And that wasn't the first time I've had that conversation. I've had many of those kinds of conversations, and so if we can appreciate that, just common folk are afraid of what's going on, I think we need to take note of that. And I think as a journalistic community, as a tech community, we have a responsibility here to not only talk about the risk and not only talk about the significant rewards, but also spend time in that messy middle and deal with some of that nuance. Right. And I get it. It's hard when you're dealing with a quick content, kind of clickbait sort of environment, but we've got to figure that out, because we can't give ththese messages and tell these stories in 2 seconds. And I know everybody's attention span is so fast.
No,
but I mean that was the heart of the issue. So
no,
thanks
for
bringing that up.
No, I like that, because you're right. On one hand, ChatGPT is not Skynet,
right.
And not everyone is going to lose their jobs because of whatever generative AI is going to come out.
Yeah.
And on the other side, it's not all roses and unicorns where AI is going to diagnose you and detect your cancer 5 years ahead of time so that you can go get healed. Somewhere in between is where we're going to end up, and you're right, that messy middle is not the parts that we're talking about right now.
Yeah.
Hopefully we will, though, over time. Reggie, it's been great having you on the program. Where can people go to find more information about SAS and some of the work you're doing?
Awesome. Well, of course you can go to www.sas.com, and that kind of takes you into everything. We've got a responsible innovation page out on that site as well, so you can see all about myself and my team there. And of course, folks can catch me on LinkedIn. I love to kind of have these kind of conversations out in the open. Transparency is important as it relates to AI, of course. And so,
awesome.
Let's hook up.
Awesome. Reggie, thank you so much for being on the program. Really appreciate it.
You're very welcome. Thanks for having me.
Hey, if you enjoyed this content, we'd love for you to get out more great content at healthcareittoday.com. I'm Colin Hung. Thanks for being here, and we'll catch you on the next video.